Happy 2023, and your Anchorage Symphony Orchestra is ready to celebrate the new year with all of you with a live concert with the wonderful theme of Latin Vistas. And Elizabeth, I'd like to ask you first to maybe talk a little bit about how you came up with the idea and the programming for this very unique concert.
It came up because our principal percussionist, Stephen Alvarez, just said, boy, there's this one piece I wish we could play sometime down the line. It has 12 percussionists in it. And I immediately remembered this piece, of course, and that's the Revueltas, the night in the night of the Mayas. It's music that was written as a soundtrack for a film in 1939, but and arranged into a suite by someone else. But fantastic piece of music with just the most, at the time, certainly exotic and I would have to say very evocative sounding percussion instruments. And so just the spectacle of it. And the fact is that in Anchorage, we can do that because we have at least 12 percussionists who are in the town and I just know that there is just a marvelous enthusiasm around percussion in Anchorage. And so I said, well, why don't we do it? And why don't we plan for a Latin concert, Latin concert, Spanish Latin concert, because there's so many wonderful pieces of music. And I knew of many that we could do. And what this does, this piece by Revueltas, which is a 4-movement piece, it's kind of like a symphony made out of a soundtrack, a suite made out of a soundtrack. And it offers kind of a slam bang end to a concert that is very evocative and it has all the highs and the lows of the people of Latin America and the mysteries of Spain and the beauty of it, the beauty of the countryside and the history and the people who are so incredibly rich with history and tradition and strong and passionate and joyful. I would say that this concert is albeit the Night of the Mayas is about a tragedy, in the same way there's just so much joy that comes out of the music. And so I just thought, well, let's put together a great program. And it was easy to program, actually, because I knew exactly what to do.
And every piece says something different. I mean, there's definite variety, even with one theme. So we're all looking forward to exploring the rest.
Right. Well, I mean, there's a huge variety of Latin communities, of indigenous communities in Latin America, and the Spanish community. I mean, there's just this history, there's tradition, and there's just variety in and of itself. I mean, anyone that thinks it's just one size fits all will be, I think, delighted to hear that it certainly isn't.
And related to your pointing out about the percussionist use and the number of percussionists who will play a ton of instruments, we want to thank the Atwood Foundation. Our executive director, Sherry Burkhart-Reddick, was able to write a grant, and they generously funded, allowing us the ability to purchase some of the unusual instruments that we need for this concert, as well as then repairing some of our instruments that have really needed some upkeep work and replacing a few things. So very, very grateful for the Atwood Foundation's support of this project, and then the instruments we'll be able to use for years to come.
Absolutely. So, it's an incredible gift, and it means everything to the orchestra because it, as you say, it allows us to do basically any piece of music that's written for orchestra at this point. And I think people forget these instruments need maintenance, they need upkeep. They don't just sort of stay perfect and pristine. Remember, they're being struck and swept and all kinds of things. And there's wear and tear, as in any appliance or instrument that you use. And to have this generous gift to allow us to fix and replace as necessary is just incredible. It really is.
Well, the percussionists are revving up now.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the opening piece for the concert is by Gabriela Frank. And she's one of the best known female composers in the world, and a remarkable human being with her commitment to social justice and social services and the arts and gender equity, disability equity. I mean, she's just amazing in her contribution, but her music is just always just raved about by anyone who hears it or plays it. So what led you to pick this particular work? And I know that she brings a partial Latin American heritage in her family. She's an American composer, born here, but her heritage is very intriguingly mixed. So what about the Latin American dances do you love the most and are looking forward to about on this concert?
Well, I've known this piece since it was written. I've known Gabriela Lena Frank for for many years, and I met her a long time ago. I think she was composer in residence at Aspen sometime, some well over 10 years, 15 years ago. And I had dinner with her and her parents. Lovely, incredibly gifted and intelligent woman. Her father is Lithuanian Jew and her mother is Chinese Peruvian. So she has so many backgrounds to draw on for her inspiration, but she really does tend to be fascinated in a large part with the Peruvian and South American history and tradition and music. And she often, I would say not exclusively, but she often writes works, especially for orchestra, that have their roots in the traditional music of South America and the many different peoples and countries. So it's not all one. And the three Latin American dances are wonderful because the first one is kind of an homage, at least at the very beginning, to Leonard Bernstein and his symphonic dances from West Side Story. The actual first gesture, da da dum, which you hear in the West Side Story, you hear in this piece as well, and then it goes off into its own direction. But we immediately are thinking of the tradition of bringing Latin American music into mainstream American experience, at least on a theatrical level, and in music history, because I think Bernstein's West Side Story is arguably his magnum opus. Not completely. I mean, there's some other fantastic pieces and everything, but we know him for that, I would say, almost more than anything else, because it just crosses so many boundaries. And so the first dance is super attractive. It's just a wonderful, forward-moving dance for orchestra, very positive, very uplifting, very joyful. The second movement is for me the heart of the piece and the most impressive, and that's the Harawi. Is that how you say it? Rahawi. I can't remember exactly. It's got an H and an R at the beginning, and so that's hard for me. It is filled with mystery and echoes, and you feel like you're going into another world. It's beyond a fairy tale. It's fable. It's the mists of a land that is being revealed to you, and the power of that. And I think it's just an incredible movement, which is interrupted by the god of thunder, and in the form of a spinning top, and that is again spectacular because you have these flashes. The orchestra really creates the flashes of thunder and lightning it strikes, and it really is astonishing to me. And then the third movement, I think, is mestizo. Is that right?
Yes.
Mestizo Waltz, and that is an homage to the blurring of identities. In other words, the Western meets South American meets indigenous traditions all come together in this final piece. And that's and she celebrates it. So I find it a wonderful statement that could only be written in the 21st century because of just the cultural awareness and also the absolute mastery of orchestration that has really allows her to do anything with the orchestra and make it an expressive and descriptive ensemble. I mean, it paints pictures, and it's quite joyful and energetic and mysterious and powerful. And it's a tour de force. And I think it's really her first tour de force. She's done many others since, but this one was written right before I think her son was born, and it was dedicated to his coming and to the dances that he would dance, the journey he would take. And I thought that was such a lovely dedication for her son to be. And I'm sure he's probably in high school at this point, or maybe beyond at this point. So.
Oh, wonderful. Well, I've been looking through my part, and it's going to be so much fun as we put this together and then perform together with the vibe of a live audience, which always brings everything even more to life than on the rehearsal.
Right, and I just wanted to say one other thing. I forgot, and if I did, I'm sorry that I'm repeating myself, but in that second movement, Gabriela she's from, her mother's from Peru, and so she's using Peruvian, the Andean music, the flute,
bamboo
that
flute.
idea of the melody and all that, so she's using herself as and in some ways I think it's a kind of self-portrait as well. The West meets South American, meets other Bernstein, Jewish, doing Puerto Rican music, except it really, that's her too.
Well, what a wonderful start to the concert. And then to go from there to the Gardens of Spain with Paya's beloved works. It was such an interesting personality in Spain. A music historian I really like, David Ewan, described him as a mystic who was trying to always find the soul of Spain through his music. And he was very reclusive and worked very carefully and slowly on his scores. But the original version of this piece was piano nocturnes, piano solos, but then he was advised by friends to maybe consider creating an orchestral work about it. But if you could talk a little bit, this isn't really a piano concerto. It's more like he described it as symphonic impressions that feature and showcase the piano. But why don't you just give us your thoughts on this music and its unique qualities? And again, what a wonderful piece to bring in January to Anchorage, Alaska.
Indeed. Well, you're right. He did start out, he had so much success with some piano works that were based in with Spanish themes. They were well loved and performed by his peers, and they were published. And he thought he would write another set, and thought of nocturnes. And Albani said, "No, why don't you put this with orchestra?" And then he cut from 4 down to 3, and indeed it turned into a 3-movement piece where the second movement goes into the third. So it's one long piece. It looks like there's just 2 movements, but the second goes into the third. And it also was going to be portraits of cities in Spain. And over the years, I mean, the First World War really ensued. And it was after the First World War that he got back to it. He had started earlier when he was in Paris, and then he went back to Spain. And after the sort of in, 1916 or so, toward the end of the war, he got back to work at it. And in the meantime, he had changed his ideas to depict gardens and nature and the people in, teeming in around. It's not only flowers and trees or anything like that, but just places that are famous for gardens, and certainly Spanish gardens, we all know, are very famous, particularly ones around the Alhambra, but other places as well, obviously. And I think his visit to, I think it was 7 years in Paris. And of course, he got to know everyone from, Ravel and Debussy and all those people were around 1907. I think Debussy was still around. And all the other fabulous composers and performers. And I think he picked up a lot in terms of orchestration. So on some level, the FIA was given the gift of a mastery of once again of orchestration, and everything about Spanish Latin music is about color, and I think in such bright ways. Think of Ravel. He wrote so much. His mother was Basque, and so he wrote a lot of Spanish themed music as well. But whenever Ravel's writing something very French, you hear it, and when he's writing something Spanish, you hear it. And in Falla, it's just pure Spanish nobility, beauty, ease of movement, but strict rhythm and rigorous, but never overpowering. And that's what I loved about this piece. It's not a concerto, as you said. It's kind of a partnership of piano and orchestra, where it's not so much a conversation that is back and forth, but rather going together. It's as if everyone's going together to see the same thing, and there is commentary along the way, but it's not a kind of competition. There's no rivalry. There is some call and answer occasionally, but it's not in the same way as, I'm going to introduce the theme and then you do, that kind of thing. It's more rhapsodic and impressionistic. And I find it just so gorgeous and wonderful in this program, which is so much about rhythm and power and mystery, that this piece has all of that, but in a very refined and a little bit more, just a different, you can feel, for me, the a Spanish feeling, as opposed to, say, a Mexican or a Peruvian or a Mayan, an imaginative, in Revueltas' imagination, a Mayan temperament. You really have a sense of the people that built the gardens, that tend the gardens, and the gardens themselves are very organized and beautiful and full of magic and scent and color. But it is one that is, I don't want to say reserved in a bad sense, but just one in which it's not all in your face. Does that make sense? There's something to, as if someone is putting their hand out and saying, look, this is beautiful, rather than, hey, look at that. Here's your, smell this rose, that kind of thing. It's, again, I've used the word a lot tonight. Evocative is the word that comes up.
Sensual. Another word that
very sensual, absolutely, no question about it. And each movement has a different flavor, obviously, different place. And the central movement, again, very much like the Lena Frank piece, Gabriela's piece. The slow movement is full of mystery, and then it goes into the final kind of push us to the end kind of faster feeling. And the first movement's a little bit of all that, has a little bit of slow. It's very rhapsodic, and which just means that you're not going to get a main theme and then a second theme and development. It's not traditional in a classical sense. It goes where it needs to go to show you his impressions of these gardens. And what's interesting is, I'm not sure whether he had a book of the gardens of Spain. I'm not sure whether they were paintings. I believe they were paintings by someone that inspired him. And he
Yes,
also had some friends who were travel guides or travel writers, became very friendly with them. And they also, their experiences and their friendship informed the piece as well, in terms of just his friends depicting the peoples that they had met along in their travels, and of course his own experience when he went back to Spain.
great. Now, have you worked with the pianist who will be our guest artist before?
Yes, twice before. And one time I did the Gardens of Spain in Flagstaff, and I've done the Paganini Rhapsody, the Rachmaninoff Paganini Rhapsody, or variations on a theme of Paganini. And she's a brilliant pianist and lovely, lovely person. And it was wonderful to be able to explore the piece for the first time, both of us, several years ago now in
Okay,
Flagstaff.
great. Well, we'll look forward to welcoming her to Anchorage and all our snow, and we will dream of.
Yes, because she's from Venezuela, so I don't know. But she's been living in New York a long time, so she's used
Yeah.
to cold weather.
Okay. Well, next in this amazing program is a work by Moncayo, and this Huapango. I'll have you describe it in just a second in the way you would like to present it. But I was really taken by a quotation I found from French composer Darius Milhaud describing his adoration of this piece. And he said that when in the gray light of a Parisian winter, I want there to be sun in my flat, I always listen to a record of Huapango. So tell us about this piece.
I have to say, if you could bottle joy, that's this piece.
Wow.
It's so upbeat and passionate and heartfelt, and it's kind of a Mexican national anthem in a way. Anytime it's played, and it's obviously well known in his native country of Mexico. It's written in the 1950s somewhere, but and it's been a hit ever since. It's one of those orchestral showpieces. Although it seems to have more recently gained traction, I think Dudamel and his Venezuelan Youth Orchestra used to feature it in their programs, and I think it just took off. It's been played more and more, and as conductors from Latin America champion it, of course, as well, and bring it to Europe and to the United States. But I've seen a couple of performances where someone goes, "Viva Mexico" at the end. There's just a sense of pride and nationality, and national pride in any time a performance of this happens. People want to jump up, and I thought it would be a wonderful. I don't know, what would you call it? A contrast with the Revueltas, which is so dark and mysterious, and it moves and it dances, but it's a very different piece. This one is all joy, and then you have the tragedy toward the end with the Revueltas. The Moncayo has a slow section. It's kind of fast, fast, and it's 7 minutes of joy. That's how I would say it. It's almost too magical to try to break it down and analyze why or anything. I think there's a perpetual motion to it. The instrumentation is fantastic. There's a wonderful feature for harp, and of course the Mexican harp is a very important instrument, and the harp in the orchestra gets to play something that you would hear in Mexico: a harp, trumpet, trombone, violin, and harp. Those are the instruments that you would hear. Of course, the percussion instruments, the maracas, and the other instruments that you might hear. But yeah, it's just 7 minutes of joy.
And then we conclude with the Revueltas, which the suite was arranged. I was fascinated now that we had an experience with the silent movie recently. part of our rep over the last years. Um, it was so fun to know that he had scored 36 sequences for this film. And then what happened is Jose Lamontor came along later and in 1961 created this suite. And he said himself that he took some gigantic liberties with it, adding improvisations for percussion and the finale part of it, etc. But that it's been a way to make his music live, and we are so
Yes,
grateful for that
yes,
attention to the talent.
absolutely. This is, yeah, I agree with you 100%. I was thinking about that today because I was listening to the version that Hindemith put together. It's about a
Mm-hmm.
12-minute for smaller orchestra, although it does use some wonderful percussion instruments as well, just not as many. I mean, the Revueltas, Mr. Limentor used a conch shell or conch shell, uh, uh, a wooden log. I mean, all kinds of different
Yeah.
instruments, Congo, bongo, just everything. It's just fantastic. And the Hindemith, you hear, I thought it was 39 excerpts, but I think it's 36. I think you're right. In my head, it was 39. I wanted to hear all 39. And if you can imagine that he wrote them out so that they could fit into a film that was already edited, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, well, here's something that can be used for upbeat. This can be used for mystery, or this can be used for, and I'm wondering whether it was the director who chose what music where to go.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
whether if it was actually of Revueltas, he must have known the story, and he must have been told, I need some, tragic music here. I need a main theme. I need a dance music. There's a love story, need that. So, and he does use one Mayan song or melody in the third movement. But for the most part, he wrote all the themes to, again, evoke this mystery of a gringo, white man who goes and discovers a tribe of a lost tribe of Mayan people. And this film would never make it in the 21st century. I'm sure it was filled with all sorts of stereotypes and biases and just cringe-worthy attitudes. But the hero falls in love with the native woman, and yeah, it's just the music itself is what has been saved, and sort of gives it its name and puts it on the map in film history. But what Mr. Limantour did, I think, surpasses anything that Hindemith, and Paul Hindemith was very substantial as a composer, but I think Limantour was closer to it, perhaps. And much more invested. And by 1960s, by the 50s and 60s, the orchestras, the orchestration, everything was getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And the possibilities with the music that Revueltas had left, the 36 excerpts or whatever you would call them, I was thinking of word scramble. I mean, you can just, okay, I love this theme. I'm going to make the main theme of the piece this. And I can't help but think, because both the Hindemith and the Limantour start with this big, mysterious, big tam-tam, crashing, the big gong crashing, and dark music, full orchestra, that must have opened the theme. It's almost as iconic as the Star Wars main theme, with that kind of, it's not a fanfare, because it's just opens with just a big gong and just the full orchestra making these slow chords. But there's something iconic about it, and it goes away for a while in the first movement, and then it comes back at the end, and you recognize it immediately as this sounds like main theme music. Second movement, big dance. Third movement uses the Mayan song beautifully in a quiet, slow, evocative, once again, piece of music. And then the fourth brings us out. It's kind of tragic, but the thing that everyone's waiting for is the up to 5 minutes, 7 minute, however long it takes, a cadenza with the 12 instruments, 12 percussionists playing many instruments. And that can either be based on the way Mr. Limantour suggested, or we can figure one out ourselves. But I'll be working with the percussionists to find out how we want to do that. But it is pretty spectacular, and everyone gets a chance to shine and show off their improvisatory skills in that one. So it's quite a tour de force, again, for full orchestra, but there's a spectacle to it.
Yes.
And it really does lend to the listener images. It just, even if it's not what the film was at all about, you have a sense of who are these mysterious, powerful, magical people, and this magical place of, lost to time. It's, I just spectacular piece of music. And I'm so glad, people don't do this piece. I've been asking around, I've asked colleagues, have you ever played it? Oh, I've heard of it. I've never done it. And here in Anchorage, I hope our audiences are able to appreciate, this is a huge piece of music. It calls for big numbers of people. And in Anchorage, we have the opportunity to hear a piece like this because we have musicians who are good enough to play a piece this difficult. And, we have 12 people and plus who can play percussion at a very high level, a professional level. And you'll see them all on this stage. It's really a spectacle, along with wonderful music. And it does allow us to, Revueltas didn't write a whole lot. He lived a short life, kind of burned his candles on both ends. And he just didn't leave a whole lot for us. Certainly the Sense Maya is his greatest work that he wrote, that he orchestrated. But this piece also leaves us with an indication of his great talent. And he, as Mr. Limantour and others have said, he lives on because of this piece. And I really can count on the fingers of one hand the amount of performances that I have heard of this piece or heard play of this piece. So it's an opportunity for people to hear a piece that isn't often programmed because of the immensity of the orchestra.
Right. Well, we're really proud to be able to do this, and
it's exciting.
Thing will be so rich with color and humanity and a salute to traditions, but also to creativity and ingenuity of talent of four remarkable composers. Mm-hmm. So we look forward to bringing this all to life for all of you. Your Anchorage Symphony Orchestra is really happy about our January Latin Vistas. And also don't forget that there will be other concerts that are going to be glorious for the remainder of our season. So look at your calendars and get everything figured out. And we look forward to
really are, we're back and we're on a roll.
We're on a big roll, lots to come. So Elizabeth, thank you. And we look forward to our concerting together. So
thank you, Susan.
Onward.